Amber and welcome back to my channel. In today's video we're going to do my April wrap up in the second part. I ended up reading 41 things in the month of April and I decided to split the wrap up in two parts. This is like the last 10 days in April because I read quite a few books for Dewey's 24-hour readathon and they were not all that great, but I figured I'd split it in half and here's the second part. That being said, let's get started. The first book I want to talk to you about is Becoming by Michelle Obama. This is about Michelle Obama's life before and after she met Barack, and including the presidency, and I ended up giving this book 5 stars. She really does have a way with words and it was really nice to kind of learn more about her and her life. And if you're interested in this book and like knowing more about her, I definitely recommend it. And I listened to it on audio, which definitely like enhanced my experience of it because it felt like she was like talking to me, you know? Next, I read The Butterfly Garden, which is a FBI serial killer kind of thriller. This is kind of like the aftermath and trying to see what this one particular person who was involved knows about what happened. And it involves like kind of flashbacks to while this person's at this garden. And it is really messed up. I ended up giving this book 3 stars. I found myself expecting more, however, from the reviews, and I'm realizing that this book is older than some of the newer, like more twisted thrillers that I have been reading, and that might actually have affected my like thoughts going into it, because I've read more twisted thrillers that have come out after it and I was expecting something along those levels going into it, so that really might have been on me. That being said, there is a large like need for suspension of belief based on like stuff happening in this book in order to make it any bit plausible. But overall it was a like weirdly fun time reading it. I like read in one sitting. I ended up wanting to continue on in the series, which you will continue to see in this part of the wrap-up. Next, I read Morbius, the Living Vampire, the Man Called Morbius, which is the comic book kind of like bind-up story talking about Morbius, the living vampire, the Man Called Morbius. Haha. I read Marvel comics sometimes and I have a thing for vampires. We've talked about it. I really wanted to look forward to Morbius, despite obvious things that I'm not a fan of. That being said, I read the comic. I gave it 3 stars. That being said, I didn't like the art style. You can tell an art style by a cover. I still tried. I didn't like the art style. I gave this 3 stars. The writing was okay. I didn't understand what was going on with the plot because sometimes that happens with comics, especially Marvel comics, but like it made it seem like it was gonna be contained, but it wasn't contained. It did not do the self-contained thing it was pretending it was doing, and then it also had terrible art. So I gave it a 3. Next, I read Girl Gone Viral by Alicia Rai. I received an e-arc of this through Edelweiss in exchange for an honest review, and I'm so glad I got to read this one early. This is the second book in the Modern Love series trilogy. I don't know how many books there are in this, but I am so excited I got to read it. As you guys know, the first book in this series was one of my favorite books of last year, and I was like desperate to read this one because it was kind of like a bodyguard kind of romance, and like I just loved this character so much in the original book, and she had like a lot of anxiety and I also have anxiety, and it was a good time. I gave this book 5 stars. If you liked the first book, I definitely recommend this one. It does again talk about like topics in modern love, and it's a good time. I recommend this series, and I definitely want to check out other Alicia Rai books. I've read, I think, 1 before, maybe, but like, I definitely want to check out more. Next, I read Roses of May, which is the second book in the Collector series by Dot Hutchinson. Like I said before, I decided to continue on in the series. This is about a girl who's interconnected with the FBI group because her sister had been murdered by a serial killer before, and it seems like the serial killer might be coming after her. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. In addition to the suspension of belief that I had noticed in the prior book, I had also noticed in this one there are implications that happen in it that really bring down the rating for me. However, there are a couple of people who feel opposite to me in this, but they really drive trying to make the first book connect with this one through the FBI agents, and I really appreciated that, because if otherwise, what was the point of having them in the first book and driving them over? So there is interconnectivity between the first 2 books, like strong interconnectivity, which I really appreciated, especially with these characters connecting and talking about like grief and stuff like that. And it was a really like nice to see moment. I overall, like I said, gave this one 3 stars because of the implications, and the suspension of belief was outstanding in this one. However, something about the writing style in this series was so addicting that I immediately picked up the next book in the series, which was called The Summer Children, which follows the 3rd in the little trio of FBI agents, and like I ended up giving this one 3 stars as well. This series is like impulsively readable if you're into thrillers about like serial killers and FBI agents. If you can obviously suspend your belief, I would recommend them. I ended up, obviously, like I said, giving this one 3 stars. Next, I ended up reading The Dating Charade by Melissa Ferguson. This is another backlist arc that I ended up picking up that I had gotten from NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. Basically, this is about a woman who is really good at getting bad first dates and good at escaping them. Then she gets an online date with a guy who had a crush on her in the past, and it's actually a good first date, and then their personal lives kind of end up coming to a head. I give this one 3 stars. It's more about the characters and the journey than the romance, whereas the story synopsis kind of makes it think that it's about romance, not the characters. Unfortunately, when it decides to focus on the romance, it feels very forced because it wasn't built up as much as you would think prior to it. Because it was the first date. It wasn't like it was the second date or the third date when everything starts to erupt around them that makes them focus on their journeys that they're going on. So it feels very forced when other situations are arising. Additionally, the female character's journey feels kind of white saviory at times because of who her journey is surrounding, and like that is obvious with what her job could be, but her journey specifically involves her adopting like several kids that were under her care, and like looking after several kids that are under her care, and it left a bad taste in my mouth at times. All right, next I'm just going to kind of blow through a couple of books right quick just to make this easy on all of us. I read a couple of books in the Ice Planet Barbarian series. This is a series about women who crash land on a ice planet where there is blue aliens, and they end up pairing off. Each book follows a different woman and a different alien kind of pairing off, and they have different tropes, and they're slightly short and slightly erotic, and they're really fun. And sometimes I get sad and I read them. I read several in the month of April. It was a thing. I'm going to tell you about them now. The first one I ended up reading was called Barbarian. It was number 4 in the series. I ended up giving it 3 stars, and like I said, the series is ridiculous sounding. It's enjoyable. And that was literally my review for book 4. Then I read Barbarian's Prize, which was book 5. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. And then I read Barbarian's Mate, which was book 6, which had a cranky love interest, which are some of my favorite that I've noticed in this series. And I gave this one 3 stars as well. Next I read Beyond the Black Door by Am Strickland. This I received an e-arc of through NetGalley in exchange for an honest review. Again, I was trying to get through some of the backlist NetGalley arcs. This one is about a girl who can soul walk and journey into people's souls while they sleep, and basically she sees this black door when she sleeps, and she was told to never go to it, and she didn't listen, and that's kind of where the story picks up. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I am kicking myself for not getting to it sooner. It involves an asexual protagonist, and it's a unique dark fantasy, and like I said, I'm very much so kicking myself for not getting to it sooner. It's a little long for me, but that being said, I really enjoyed it. Next, I read the very last book in the Collector series by Dot Hutchinson, which was the Vanishing season. This one kind of felt like an extra book kind of tacked on in the end once everybody was kind of complaining about this plotline not being solved. But one of the detectives that we follow throughout the series has a missing case of their own, and this one kind of involves that. I'm just giving it 2 stars because it just really feels like an extra case tacked on at the end, and it just didn't feel necessary. It felt like an afterthought, and I just wasn't a fan of it, so I ended up giving it 2 stars. Next, I read Barbarians Touch, which was the 7th book in the Isolated Barbarian series. You get what I mean by sometimes I've just binged them and read a lot of them in a row. I ended up giving this one 2 stars. It was a combination of the reading too many of them in a row and not liking the dynamics that were involved in this story. I ended up deciding to just try to pause them for a minute while I was reading other things for Dewey's, because you'll see where my Dewey's heads in a moment, and it gets really bad really fast. Next, I read the Dryads Paw Print, which is the first book in the Paranormal Council series. This is about a panther shifter who kind of has a normal life and is summoned by the council and told he's getting married to someone else. I ended up giving this 3 stars. It's short, sweet, to the point, but overall pretty surface level for even like a paranormal romance with the plot that it has. Especially since it's a novella-length story. Next, I read From Scratch by Katrina Jackson, which is a menage story involving a new-to-town baker and a police chief and a fire captain, and it's a bit info-dumpy in the beginning, and it's very short and overall pretty sweet and polyamorous, and I gave it 3 stars. Mostly for the info dumping in the beginning, because I didn't expect her to give us her entire life story for like a good chunk of this book. Next, I read I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is, I don't want to get into this book. It is about a guy and a girl who are driving to his parents' house, and they're going to visit, and the girl is thinking about breaking up with the guy. I'm giving this book 1 star. I can't explain why I think I'm Thinking About Ending Things got 1 star without spoiling this entire book. I might do a blog post talking about it, because this is one of the few books that I've read so long ago that I gave 1 star that I'm still this frustrated by, and I can't articulate in a video. So I'll probably at some point make a blog post about it. So be on the lookout for that, but I gave this one 1 star. It was a fun time. It was a fun time reading that one during Dewey's. So after that, I ended up deciding to like get myself some fun. And so I read To Tame a Wicked Widow, which I ended up giving 4 stars. This is the 2nd book in the Surrey SFS series, which is the Sexual Freedom Society series. And it's about a guy who is the like duke and a woman who is widowed, and you know, the young virgin and the older experienced lady kind of trope in a historical romance setting. That was a good time. I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read the 3rd book in the Surrey Sexual Freedom Society, and that was My Lord, Lady, and Gentleman. This is about a lord and a lady who are kind of struggling, and they meet a gentleman who is like a painter, and they kind of all start having feelings for each other. And it's just like so cute and real steamy, and I really enjoyed it. I can't wait to continue on in the series. It's always like it's a treat. I don't have very many of them left, and I'm gonna be real bummed when I finish the series off, but it's been a fun time reading them, not gonna lie. Next, I read A Tough Case to Crack, which is about a mystery in a nut shop, and basically there was a murder, and for this woman to open her nut shop on time, she had to try to solve this murder. And I ended up giving this 2 stars because I just didn't care. I didn't care about the woman, I didn't care about her nut shop, I just didn't care. So I ended up giving this one 2 stars. I ended up finishing it. I didn't care. I didn't care if it opened. I didn't care. I just didn't care. Really didn't care about that. Next, I read Between the World and Me, which is a letter from a father to his son, talking about American history and his ideals and concerns. It was really extra interesting reading this, living in like near Baltimore and him talking about Baltimore a lot in the like letter, because I can extra kind of like picture some of the things. I listened to the audio of this as an aside, and it was narrated by him, so I got like an extra like layer to it. I ended up giving this one 4 stars because I feel like the flow was a little muffled at times, but it was otherwise pretty thought-provoking. Next, I read Blonde Hair, Blue Eyes by Karen Slaughter, which is the prequel novella to Pretty Girls, which was an interesting decision for me since I've already read Pretty Girls, but it really doesn't add anything to Pretty Girls, but it doesn't add anything to after reading Pretty Girls. If you've read Pretty Girls, it was an interesting choice. I ended up giving it 3 stars because I always like reading Karen Slaughter's writing, but now that I've read Pretty Girls, it didn't add anything, but it also was interesting like revisiting it, but I don't know. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. I guess I just miss Karen Slaughter's writing sometimes. I don't know. Then I decided to read Barbarians Taming, which is the 8th book in the Ice Planet Barbarian series. And again, I've just been on an Ice Planet Barbarians kick, and I gave this one 3 stars. It was better than the previous book. And the very last thing that I read in the month of April was Taste of Marrow, which is the 2nd book and the final book in the River of Teeth duology by Sarah Gailey. This is about an alternate history where hippos are brought in to kind of handle like the marshlands. And I ended up giving both books in this duology 4 stars, but this one is like the end of the duology, and it is assassins and conmen, and like basically instead of horses and like as the thing that like people are being outlaws on, it's hippos, and it's a good time. I think that was just like the theme of like some of my reading. It's just, I just want to have a good time. You know, sometimes I just want to have a good time. I didn't end up reading anything physically, and I'm going to have a lot of wrap-ups where I'm just not holding things up anymore. Alright, so that is everything for my second part of April wrap-up. What about you? Again, April was quite some time ago, but do you have any thoughts on any of the books I mentioned here in today's wrap-up? Let me know in the comments down below. If you like what you saw today, be sure to like and subscribe. I normally post videos on Wednesdays. Thank you so much for watching, and have a nice day!